Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast with me, Jonathan Puddle. Thank you for tuning in today. This is episode number 38, and it's a little spicy. If your children are going to listen to this one, you may want to prepare yourself for a robust conversation around sexual intimacy in marriage, which is a good conversation. You should have that conversation with your children. I have had a number of conversations around sexual intimacy with my children, and I encourage everybody to do the same. Hey, listen, if you've ever struggled with anxiety or depression or panic attacks, join me next week and going forward for a book study. We're studying Sarah Ebol's book, Fearless in 21 Days, A Survivor's Guide to Overcoming Anxiety. Sarah is actually a contributor to Sheila's blog, Sheila being my guest on the show today. So they do some writing together. There's just a bunch of really cool Canadian women producing great content at the present time, and I commend them all to you. Listen to this podcast and then go check out toLoveHonorAndVacuum.com for Sheila's writing as well as Sarah Ebol's writing, who is the author of the book we're studying next week. I'm excited for you to listen to this. I'm excited for your marriage. I'm really passionate about marriage. It's wonderful. It's hard. It's challenging. It's exciting. It's many, many things. And I pray that your marriage would be enriched by this. Oh, and once again, I have offered some summarizing thoughts at the end of this podcast about one of the subjects that we discussed together. I offered a few closing thoughts on that matter at the end, which you can hear at the end. All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have another Canadian. I'm always super pumped to have someone semi-local on the show. I've got speaker, author of a number of books, including The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex. She runs a popular blog, To Love, Honor, and Vacuum. It's Sheila Wray Gregoire. Thank you for joining me on the show.
Yeah, how's it going, eh?
How's it going, eh? So Sheila, you're in Belleville, or?
Yeah, Southern Ontario, halfway between Toronto and Ottawa.
Fantastic.
Yes, that's Toronto with 2 syllables, starts with a CH. That's how you know you're Canadian.
My best friend grew up in Belleville. He lives in Kitchener now. And I'm in Guelph. So Hooray for small town Ontario.
Yes, right across the 401. We're all connected.
Exactly. So what have you been up to lately? You're traveling a bunch and you're speaking. You've got, I think, 6 or 8 books now. What's new and exciting in your world?
Yeah, well, I mean, the blog is where I spend most of my time. You know, To Love, Honor, and Vacuum, when you feel like marriage is more of a to-do list instead of a passionate adventure. And so it's how to make it more of a passionate adventure. And I find myself, just trying to get away from a lot of the pat answers that the church gives about a lot of things. And I think that's why the blog keeps growing and takes a lot of my time. And it's a lot of fun because I get to tell people what to do and I get to comment on current stuff. And I love that.
So, just in case you don't know To Love, Honor, and Vacuum, I mean, you cover the gamut from, you know, what does leadership look like in the home to how to have multiple orgasms. So, you know, there's a pretty broad spectrum of marriage.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff on sex for sure, because I think that was just my niche. And once I started writing more about sex, it's funny how many more people started reading the blog, especially men. But I don't only do that. I do cover a lot of other marriage things too. And I get into some pretty controversial topics with regards to how the church tends to look at marriage, because I think it's really counterproductive, a lot of the prevailing views that are out there. Yeah,
absolutely. I had Joshua Harris on the show, which was really fun discussion.
Yes.
You know, he had just put out this documentary. He had just issued this statement retracting his books.
Way to go. By the way, I respect him so much for doing that. Totally respect him for that.
Yeah. I was really impacted, actually, in that discussion. He was so humble, I thought, and so... I mean, he said, look, I'm not willing to pontificate on matters for the church anymore. I just kind of I felt like it was a public issue, and so I needed to put this thing out there publicly in response, and now I just kind of want to disappear.
Right.
But one of the things that we came upon in that conversation was that with the purity culture, there was such a focus on wait for the perfect one, wait for the perfect one, wait for the perfect one, don't sleep around, don't give a piece of your heart away to everybody, that nobody was actually equipped how to be married to an imperfect person.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's like, oh, whoops.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges then that you're hearing or that you have a real burden for?
Well, there's a whole lot. I mean, to go along with one of the things that Josh Harris was talking about is the way that he talked about courtship, especially in his book Boy Meets Girl, much more than I Kiss Dating Goodbye, for instance, was very regimented. You know, you could never be alone with a person in a house. You could never touch them basically in any way except for perhaps a side hug. Like, it was very, very regimented. And what I fear is that people are getting married after that kind of a relationship and they don't really know each other because they've never done life together. Yeah. There's a point where you can't be chaperoned all the time and you can't, it's not even practical. I mean, you know, my daughters there were times when they were both living alone when they were in their 20s. Like, how are you supposed to spend time with someone if you can't actually share be in there, you know, that he can't be in the house with you or something. And that total legalism, I think, really messes people up, because if all you ever do is go out for dinner and a movie, you don't really know that person. You have to go grocery shopping. You have to see whether they can clean a toilet.
You need to try hanging wallpaper together.
Yeah, like, you got to do you just need to do life. Like, and so I think that it was setting people up for knowing the outside of a person and not really knowing their character. Yeah. And that was a big detrimental thing that I talk about a lot on the blog.
So one of the things that again came up in that conversation were some of our aspects of this purity culture actually an outward manifestation of some of our inner issues. Like, I think you just summed up quite interestingly, this dating method was great at getting to know the outside of a person, but worthless at the deep inner life. It says to me, maybe, is our entire concept of relationships and church and community and self-sacrificial love, like at a deep level, afraid of getting underneath the surface.
Absolutely. I think, see, if you could do things by rules, then you wouldn't need the Holy Spirit. Like, if there really are 10 things you need to do to make your marriage good,
sure,
and then your marriage is guaranteed, then you don't need the Holy Spirit. If there are 4 rules to dating that makes you marry someone and the marriage will be perfect, you don't need the Holy Spirit. And the thing is that the Holy Spirit, I think, calls each of us to different things, because we all are going to portray a different side of God. I'm not saying there's no absolutes. There certainly are absolutes, but those absolutes, I think, are far fewer than we think. And I think that we are too busy trying to get every relationship to look a certain way, rather than asking, what is it that God is trying to show in this particular relationship? Because it might be quite different. Yeah. You know, there are some okay, to give an example, when our kids were little, I did probably 95% of the housework. And to this day, I do 100% of the cooking. And my husband does the finances, although there were times in our marriage where I did that. That's not because we believe that the woman is supposed to do the housework. It's because when our kids were little, my husband was working 120 hours in his residency at the hospital for sick children. And when he was home, I really wanted to spend time with him, and I wanted him to spend time with the kids. And so it just worked out that way. Why do I do all the cooking? Because I love cooking. I find it relaxing. I turn on Netflix. If anybody talks to me during that's my time. If anyone talks to me, then I get mad. Like I don't do it because it's a gendered thing. I do it because I like it. And yet so often we turn these things into gendered things, like the Proverbs 31 woman who can do all of these perfect things. And that may not be what God's calling your marriage to be. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Totally. It's funny. We talk a lot about that, my wife and I, and then with our friends when we're either just hanging out with friends or whether we're counseling, because I am like a really heart-forward, emotional, present guy. And while my wife has very healthy emotions, she is naturally a lot more list-based, functional. Okay, what needs to be done? So while our children know both their parents love them to bits, they know that if they want just like an unconditional, warm hug of love, they come to daddy. And if they want to be patted on the back while they watch a show or while they fold laundry and like, okay, so what's your problem and how are we going to solve it? They go to mother for that. At the present season, I'm at home working from home. So I'm cooking and cleaning and doing the laundry. I've almost always been the laundry guy. But it's like somebody told me, 100% of wives should be doing the finances. It's just better for the health of a marriage. Like, what? Why? For what reason? Oh, because I teased something out of scripture, out of context. Oh, sure. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. No. God made us so individual, and then you put two very, very individual people together, and their marriage is going to look different, and that's okay. And I don't think that the church is ready for that. I don't think the church handles that really well, and especially for gender stereotypes. I mean, one of the things that I deal with on the blog, for instance, a lot is we are so used to talking about the woman as being the one with the lower libido. But in 30% of marriages, it's actually the husband with a lower libido. And so the vast majority of books that write about sex don't even apply in 30% of marriages. And it leaves people feeling very, there must be something wrong with me. Yeah. As opposed to seeing that we're all different.
Well, yeah, that's okay. I want to hear you talk more about this. I was writing an article this week. By the time this is published, it will probably be out. And I began writing how to turn your husband down for sex. And the more I wrote, the more I was troubled, and the more I was like, I think this is just how to be a good human being. I think this is just how to have connection. I don't think this is about husbands. Maybe I'll still use the title for clickbait, but maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should stop doing that. Maybe I need to change all my language.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's a like I said, it still does apply in 70% of marriages. So what I often do, write posts aimed at the woman with the lower libido. I just always acknowledge that the other ones exist, and then I point them to other articles, because that is quite normal. But yeah, I think that we forget that that a lot of in the church we use a lot of short forms, and when we use short forms like gender stereotypes or these ideas that your life path needs to look a certain way, we end up excluding a lot of people that God would never exclude. And we just need to figure out a way to not do that as much and to get to the heart of the matter. Like what I always say about marriage is, like, what is it that God actually wants in any relationship? He wants it so that we are pointing each other to look more and more like Christ. And yet, what do so many marriage books talk about? They talk about how to make sure that she respects her husband and that she lets him lead. That's got nothing to do with making sure that everyone looks more and more like Christ. So essentially what you're doing is you're putting an idol in the way of what should be our main aim. And that's where a lot of marriage stuff goes off track, is because we're trying to make people look like stereotypes instead of getting to the heart of what Jesus wants.
That's good. That's really good. I think I spent the first 7 or 8 years of my marriage just discovering that as a concept. Just like, okay, this is not about my sexual fulfillment. Wow, that was eye-opening. And yet there is wonderful sexual fulfillment, but it's not about that.
Right.
B, it's not even about my happiness. Oh, hold on. It's not about me. Interesting. Yeah. And then, it's kind of like, I feel like God gives us this to learn and then gives us children to just hammer it home.
To hammer it in. Yeah.
So, one of the marriage books I was given, we were given and we read. And this was given to us by a wonderful man who meant so well and was on his 4th marriage.
Oh,
and
okay,
said,
I'm scared now.
and said to me, "Son, don't make the mistakes I've made," and handed me Love and Respect. Now, I've never figured out how to pronounce Emerson's last name.
I'm not even sure I'm doing it right either, because I've been talking about this so much since I wrote a series about this. I say Egrich, but I could be totally wrong. Maybe it's Egrix or something. I don't know.
Okay, well, at least we're pretty much the same. Egrix, okay. Egrich. So, Dr. Emerson Egerix, let's say.
Yeah.
God bless you, sir. Forgive us for mispronouncing your name.
Yes.
So he writes this book that basically is like, men don't need love, men need a sense of respect, and women don't need that, they just need to feel loved. And there were aspects of that message that I felt like, yeah, that feels about right. That makes sense to me. Like in some of the examples of like, there was a story of a guy who, his wife doesn't respect him. Or at least that's the way he feels. And she comes to his office one day and sees the way that all these other people respect him, and she's really convicted about the way she treats her husband, because all these other people look up to him with honor and respect. And I remember reading that story and being like, oh yeah, wow, that's for sure. I definitely want my wife to like look up to me in that way. And life goes on, and years of our marriage go on, and I realize, hold on, I'm lonely in my relationship. Why am I lonely with this woman who I love? Oh, hold on. My framework says I don't need love for some reason, that I just need this amorphous respect concept. I wouldn't solely put that at the feet of that particular book. I think there's a lot of baggage surrounding men and our emotional framework and what do men need. Sex and a beer and to be left alone.
Yeah. And a good food too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I'm not a great man according to that definition. So what are you hearing, and what have you encountered the pushback in that, and what have you been talking about in that message?
Well, Love and Respect's a funny book because, it's the best-selling marriage book, and Keith and I, my husband and I, have been speaking at marriage conferences for over 10 years now. And that book is always on the book table, and, Focus on the Family publishes it. And I always assumed it was a great book. Like I did. I never actually read it because I don't have time to read a whole lot of books. And I try not to read too much marriage stuff because I'm always afraid I'm going to steal other people's ideas. So, I actually don't read a lot of marriage books. So I always assumed it was a really good book. And then it was just a couple of weeks ago, I got into this Twitter conversation with someone about how she needed respect as well. And I thought, well, I'll just take a look at what the book actually says, because I don't actually know. And I read it, and I don't know, it was like something clicked in me. And I really went through, I wouldn't say it's a crisis of faith, but just a real grieving of what is happening in the church after I read that, because I was just devastated. And I don't use that word lightly. I could not believe how terrible that book was. And I know that's a controversial thing to say. I know that it is a book that has helped a lot of people. But as Joshua Harris said, when he disavowed I Kissed Dating Goodbye, he said, even if this book has helped a lot of people, it's also harmed a lot, and you can't risk the harm. And that book is toxic. I was reading, I started with a sex chapter, because that's what I write about. And I thought, well, I'll just see what he says about sex. Maybe I can write a post about what he says about sex. And basically, first of all, he very rarely even called it sex. He called it man's physical release. That's what he repeated over and over again in the chapter, that men need physical release. Not even that men need sex. Every now and then he would say sex, but mostly it was men need physical release. And then he said, women do not. And women will never understand how much men need physical release. And men experience respect as getting physical release. And if women don't give them physical release, they will have affairs. And then he gave all these anecdotes of people who had affairs. And if women can't understand that men are tempted to look at other women and to ogle other women, then their husbands will not be able to emotionally open up to them. And so women have to give their husbands physical release. And that's the whole message of sex that was in that book. And I'm not exaggerating.
I thankfully do not remember that, because that's horrifying.
There's nothing in the book about how women, might need sex too, or how sex was supposed to be intimate. He doesn't even use the phrase making love.
It's a release.
It's a physical release.
So,
And
yeah, our wives are just a semen toilet.
yeah, exactly. And you know, if they don't give it to them, then they're gonna look at porn or they're gonna have affairs. And because a woman can never understand how much a man needs physical release, and she will never understand that, then she needs to understand that there's really never a reason to say no.
Right. So it's just blind faith that anything your husband ever requests for in the bedroom, he requires.
Right.
No argument.
Right. And no acknowledgement that, like I said, in 30% of marriages, it's actually her that has the higher sex drive, right? Like, no acknowledgement of any of this at all. And I just think when you look at how beautifully the Bible talks about sex and how it's always a mutual thing and how it's about, you know, the Hebrew word that's used in the Old Testament is actually hauda, which is this deep knowing, this like longing for intimacy, longing to be fully known in every way. That's what the Bible talks about when it comes to sexual intimacy. And all he talked about was man's physical release. Like, that's disgusting. I'm sorry. And I'm not trying to say that men don't need physical release. I think that we do. I think that women would do a lot better if we realized we do as well, because most women don't realize that. I think that the physical is an extremely important part of sex, but it's not the only part of sex. And that's all he talked about, you know? And then there's all kinds of other things wrong with the book too, like even just the way that he sees basically this whole men need respect, women need love thing, the way that he defines respect, which he never actually does define it. So the only way you can tell what he means is by looking at anecdotes, because he never actually says what he means in the whole book. But it looks like any time he feels like she disagrees with him, he can then tell her that she's disrespecting him. So he can label anything he doesn't like as being disrespectful. And because he's the one in authority and he's the one who makes the decisions, she has to listen.
Right.
So I just had so many readers writing in telling me how, like I had an avalanche. I had over 1,000 comments and emails that week saying how their husbands read this book and it solidified emotional abuse. It solidified all kinds of different abuse. And it was really toxic in their marriage. And I just think it's time to say the emperor has no clothes, you know, because I really thought when I wrote that series, I'd get a lot more pushback. Like I'd get a lot more people saying, oh no, it's a great book because it's the #1 selling marriage book, you know, but I didn't. Like 90% of my comments agreed with me, which means I think God's doing something really cool in the church right now. And I think that together, it's okay to say the emperor has no clothes, you know, and this just doesn't work. This is crap, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so fascinating. It's like, I'm thinking through kind of sociologically, like what is happening? Is it that we all read that book in the first year of our marriage, and so we know nothing, and so we don't call BS on it?
Yeah.
Or is it that it does reinforce preconceived ideas, maybe in certain segment of the church, around non-egalitarian kind of misogynistic thinking? I mean, it sounds like boys will be boys.
It really does. And I think both those things are true. I think we do read it early in the marriage and we just assume it's right. And I think because so many people recommend it, you might read it and you might feel like something seems a little bit off here, but you assume that you're the one who's wrong. Of
course.
And I guess what I learned in reading that is we need to start shouting from the rooftops to trust your instincts. You know, and if you're reading a book and you feel like it's off, it's okay to say that.
That's good.
You know, because it could be the Holy Spirit talking to you.
Yeah. I mean, Joshua Harris said to me straight up, he was like, there's a lot of love of mammon in the Christian publishing industry. And the reason it took me so long to retract this book was because it was my identity. I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to be the best-selling author. You know, and he's like, evangelicalism loves fads. So whatever it is, if it's purity culture or something else, you know, marriage books. Yeah. Are there any books kind of counter that you feel like, yes, this captures the beauty. This is what I would much rather you read.
I'm trying to find them. I mean, in terms of sex, The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex that I wrote, definitely. And for women, you know, my book, 9 Thoughts That Can Change Your Marriage, is very much against that whole theology that love and respect espoused. What I have a hard time finding is books for couples, and I do need to do more research. But like I said, I don't tend to read a lot of marriage books.
Well, no, I totally understand.
Now I feel like I have to find some to recommend. But you
just need to write one, Sheila.
Well, I'm thinking about that. But that's another funny thing is that in the evangelical world, men are allowed to write books for couples, but if a woman writes a book, it has to only be for women.
That's true.
And so if you're a man sitting in the pews, you only ever hear men's perspective on marriage, whereas women hear both. And I think I know that always frustrates me with marriage conferences too, because we've been speaking with Family Life Canada for over 10 years, and Keith and I always speak together because I think when you're at a marriage conference, you need, like, of all places, you need to hear both the man and the woman. But in a lot, especially in the States, you're only allowed to have the man teach.
Yeah. And
I just think that's ridiculous when it comes to marriage.
Absolutely.
So
I'm talking to Beth Moore pretty soon, and so we should try and convince Beth Moore to write a marriage book. I mean, she can write about her own marriage. She wrote to me because I had been trying to get her attention on Twitter, and I was just sort of saying, listen, I love learning from all you SBC women because I'm not supposed to, and so that's cool. I like to do it anyway in rebellion. And she sort of picked up on it and said, okay, cool, I'll send you one of my Bible studies if you agree to read it. And so she sent me this amazing letter. And she said, Jonathan, my earlier books all say dear sister. Mm-hmm. But as more and more men wrote to me saying that they were reading my books, I started to change my language. Mm-hmm. And she said, I'm also just really sick of writing dear sister.
Yeah, and and I've been doing the same thing too on my blog. I've been increasingly talking about your spouse rather than your husband, because it's funny. I released a product last week, 24 sexy dares to do, 8 for him to take the lead on, 8 for her, and 8 for you both as a couple. And as the orders started coming in, it was so funny because probably half the orders were from men. And yet I know that half my readers are not men. Now, it could be that men are just more likely to buy that product. But,
Sexy dares sounds good to me.
Yeah, it also struck me that there's a lot more men reading my blog than I think, and so I really am starting to talk about spouse, because I think that, I just think there's a hunger for, especially on the part of men, maybe to start to understand their wives, because they honestly haven't been taught really well. I don't think either of us have been taught really well to truly understand the other person's point of view, because we've been taught too much in stereotypes, and that doesn't necessarily work for your individual spouse. So we need to take the broader view of what is it that God's trying to teach me here, and how can I show Jesus in this situation rather than just live up to a stereotype.
How would you encourage couples to start that journey if they're like, okay, everything that you're saying sounds like every problem in my marriage. What do I do starting different tomorrow?
I always say to couples, when you lose the ability to talk about the little things, you lose the ability to talk about the big things. And so a lot of times people feel like we have such huge issues and we can't deconstruct them, but you're not able to start deconstructing huge things until you can just talk about little things. Like, you need to bring the tension level down in your marriage. So I think the best thing a couple can do is just start learning how to chat. We stop chatting. If you don't chat and laugh together, there's no way you can have difficult conversations, like about who has the higher libido or who's supposed to do the finances. Like, you can't jump into that unless you've laughed at some point today. So I just recommend that people start figuring out a couple of key things. Get a hobby to do together, even if it's just going for a walk after dinner around the block, because when you go for a walk, you end up talking. Mm-hmm. So just do that. It's a simple thing. If you have to take your kids to hockey, we're in Canada, it's the law. Little boys have to play hockey. So
maybe little girls too, though.
Maybe little girls too. That's right. Personally, I hate ice rinks, but
so do I.
Yeah, like if your kid is going to hockey practice or skating practice or whatever, take them together and then sit on those cold benches with some hot chocolate and talk. Right? Like, just do stuff together. And then one thing that couples don't do, and I don't get this, is nobody goes to bed at the same time anymore.
Yeah.
like 25 years ago, everybody went to bed after Johnny Carson's monologue, right? Like you had the Tonight Show and Johnny Carson, and then after that was over, there was nothing else to watch, so people would go to bed. But today, because we have the internet and video games and all this stuff, everyone's on their own screen, and you just kind of go to bed when you're exhausted, and so you don't go to bed together. And that steals a lot from a marriage. And I just don't think that you can work on big marriage issues until you've got some basic things down, chat and go to bed.
That's really good. It's really true, right?
My husband always says, if you want sex to happen, it's good to be in the same room at the same time. So let's just start from the beginning, like go to bed together.
So okay. So I like this. We spent the first, I'm trying to think, by and large, the first 8 years, we've been married 13 and a half years. Mm-hmm. By and large, let's say the first half of our marriage, we went to bed at the same time practically every single night. Uh-huh. Could probably count on one hand the number of times that we didn't, assuming that we were in the home, right? Like if someone's traveling or whatever, but it was very, very normal. And so I would absolutely have said at that point, like, oh yeah, if anyone's not doing this, they have huge problems. Then we had children. Mm-hmm. And the realities of juggling a schedule and who's going to be awake all night and maybe we should take turns. Our eldest is 10, our youngest is 6. And so we've ended up, I would say probably about half the time we go to bed together. Uh-huh. And the other half the time she's tapped out and gone to bed and I'm kind of wired and up. Mm-hmm. How do you do that with the realities of young children?
Yeah, it is harder. It certainly is a challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges for parents, and it's people don't believe me when I say this, and I think that I'm being heartless, but you need to teach your kids to sleep. And that can be difficult, especially if there's autism involved or any kind of special needs. And I'm not talking about those cases, although there are pediatricians who can help you with that. My husband's a pediatrician, and there are things that they can help you with. But once you're over like 6-7 months old, you can teach your kids to sleep through the night. And you just need to do that because you matter. And I think women especially have a difficult time acknowledging that we matter, but you matter and you need sleep and you need time with your spouse. And so it's just really vital that you figure out those bedtime routines early with kids. And if you don't know how to do a bedtime routine, talk to someone who's like 60 because they do, and they would love to help you. They just aren't allowed to because you're not allowed to interfere in anyone's life. But if you go up to some 60-year-old woman and say, teach me to get my kids to sleep, it'll be like their favorite thing that's happened to them all month. Okay, so...
I can picture a number of women in my church, just that age bracket, and I can already see the gleeful look in their eye. Yeah. Oh, young person, I've been waiting to tell you off.
Exactly. So just do that. But, and that's a struggle. And then the other thing is, some of us are night owls and some of us are morning people. And so, you do get the person who's really wired at night. And my husband, for instance, he doesn't need as much sleep as I do. As I've gotten older, I need less and less. I used to need 9 hours. Now I need about 7.5, but he only needs about 6, So what he does is he just simply gets up really early. And so that we're still going to bed together. Like we had to decide, do we get up together or do we go to bed together? Because it's going to be one or the other, But we decided for us it was more important to go to bed together. For some people, they might rather get up together for different reasons. But we decided it was more important to go to bed together. And that means that, if I need to be asleep by 11, then he needs to be up by like 5:30 every morning, or else he's not going to be tired at 11 o'clock at night. Sure. If that makes any sense. Yeah. So it does take some discipline because it means he's got to get up he gets up every morning at 5:30 just so that he can be tired around the time that I need to go to bed.
There's something really beautiful about that, right? Like there's a simplicity to that I feel like you could have spent your whole marriage wrestling with because we're just different people. I'm just like this. She's just like that. Mm-hmm. We've just learned to be okay with not connecting very much
Yeah.
And yet a minor tweak that maybe some mornings doesn't feel minor to him.
Right.
Like, fair play. Maybe it does not feel like a minor tweak.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, what does that really cost him? And where's the cost-benefit analysis in terms of, hey, look, now we can actually connect. Now we're synced up.
Mm-hmm. And, my daughter, my youngest daughter just got married a year ago this weekend, and she married some guy in the military. And he has to be up every morning at 5:30 to go in for PT, and then he comes home at 8. And they have a real breakfast and stuff. But she gets up every morning at 5:30 with him just to make sure he gets out the door, gets him a cup of coffee. But it means that they have to go to bed earlier because, if she's going to get up at 5:30, she needs to be asleep by 10:30. Even 10.
That's even generous in my books. If I had to be up at 5:30, I'd be in bed by 8.
She often goes back to sleep when he leaves and then gets up again at 8.
It is.
And so they've had to juggle because he was never used to going to bed that early. But they've had to go to bed. He's had to learn to go to bed early just so that she can be up with him in the morning. And, it's little things like that matter because they want to start their day together. Right. So I could never do that. She's a better wife than me. I could never do that.
Well, that's just her receiving the blessing of your wisdom. And as the generations grow, think what incredible sex your great-grandchildren will be having thanks to all the hard work you've put in now. I feel like even that simple intentionality is foreign for a lot of people. Are they guilty? They just they don't feel like they're worthy of putting the work. Like what goes on underneath?
I think we feel like if you have to work at something, it's not natural, and if it's not natural, then it's not real. So everything should be easy, or else somehow there's something wrong with my relationship. And that's where we have really messed up in a lot of marriage advice. Because if you look at movies, the way that they portray love, everything is natural and it flows out of this, I love you so much, I'm obviously going to do this for you. And it's not very realistic. One of the ways that I think that's the most obvious and visible is the way that women feel about libidos. We feel like I can't have sex if I'm not in the mood, because if I were to, it would mean I'm lying somehow, or I'm not being true to myself. And especially in sex, I need to be true to myself. And I think what we're missing is how libido works for women. Because, if you look at any movie, TV show, whatever it is, the way that the plot goes when it comes to sex is like the couple is together and they start to pant and then they kiss and then the clothes come off and they end up in bed. And that's what we think that sex is, right? You pant, you kiss, the clothes, the bed. Pant, kiss, close, bed. And so a lot of women are sitting at home and they're waiting to pant. And they think, well, I'm not panting, so I must not be in the mood. But actually what a lot of research has found is that while men are mostly aroused before you start making love, the vast majority of women are not aroused until after you start. And it's that decision, okay, we're going to do this and I'm going to have an amazing time and I'm really looking forward to this, that actually can prompt your libido to kick in. But a lot of women think, well, that's not real. That's somehow fake. And I can't be fake. That's not fake. It's not fake to say, I want to have a great time. And so we're going to start this. And I'm sure that as we start, I'm going to start feeling good,
Sure. Unless it's made worse by men who don't know how to make love for more than 3 minutes.
Well, and that's a whole other thing that I've talked about a lot on the blog too, but yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So a friend of mine recently said something to me that sounds almost identical to what you just summed up, and I'm trying to just kind of put it in her words. She was wrestling with Valentine's Day. I don't think I want to do anything. Definitely, I don't want to tell my husband that he has to do anything, but I kind of just want him to figure out that I'm upset that he hasn't planned anything. Mm-hmm. But if I tell him, it's ruined.
Right.
How do we move through that kind of like, I want them to figure it out naturally. Mm-hmm. Is that just us needing to grow? Is that us actually sometimes we are married to clueless spouses who don't figure things out?
Mm-hmm. I think we need to go back to this. Okay, let's say that your husband does not automatically remember to get gifts, or that he buys really, really bad gifts. And so let's say that you start a Pinterest board, for instance, where you save all of the things that you might potentially want as a gift. Or let's say that you start an Amazon wish list, where you put anything you might potentially want as a gift. And then let's say that you put it in his calendar that 5 times a year he has to buy you a gift, right? Birthday, Christmas, Valentine's Day, anniversary, and Mother's Day, all right? And let's say that your husband then does those things. Does that mean he loves you less? Because to me, I almost feel like that would mean that he loves you more, because he's prioritizing it and he's making sure that he's doing what you want, right? Like, okay, yeah, we might want it to come out of spontaneously or whatever, but if it's not spontaneous, if he instead deliberately puts it in his calendar that he's going to remember to do these things because otherwise he might forget, isn't that him prioritizing it and prioritizing you?
Sounds like it.
And yet we somehow think that that's fake. And I think we need to get away from that. I think it's perfectly okay to tell someone, look, here's what I need from you, and here's exactly what it needs to look like. For a lot of people, that makes them feel a lot more confident. Like, okay, if I know exactly what it needs to look like, I can do that. Like, that's empowering, Okay, I can do that. But if it's just, I need you to do something romantic for me. Well, what's romantic? That's scary. But if you say, I need you to buy me either flowers or chocolates, and I need a card, okay, they can do that. Okay, I can do that,
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that they don't love you if they don't think about it in the same way that you do. And I think that we do need to get over some of that. And it goes both ways too. Like, I think, for guys, I just want her to want me, without me having to always be romantic. Well, if you have to warm her up a little bit, is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't know. Like, as long as she eventually says, as long as she says yes, but she wants to feel pursued a bit, I don't know that that's such a bad thing. So
there's those times where I'm like, I feel like I do all the sexual pursuit. I feel like if I didn't initiate, we'd never have sex. Yeah. I think that's probably the cry of plenty of men.
Yes.
And so I'll vocalize this, and we'll have this discussion. And after sex, when I'm feeling amazing and wonderful, I think back on those words that I said, and I'm like, what immature boy child was speaking to you? Please ignore anything he said, because that was a child.
Yeah.
My wife's going to listen to this and go, interesting. So I have permission to ignore you the next time you complain about initiation percentage rates. But I think we know. I think we know in ourselves when we're being petty, when we're being juvenile.
Yeah. And it is hard. It is hard to learn those things. And marriage is a real give and take. But one of the things my daughter and I have been talking about is, I think we say too much that marriage is hard. Marriage takes a while to learn, perhaps, but once you get these habits down, marriage can actually be quite easy. I don't find marriage that hard. I did when we first got married, because we had a lot of issues, especially with sex and with immaturity and just being tired all the time with kids. And we had some early tragedies in our marriage. We had a son who passed away, just a lot of things to deal with. But marriage itself is not hard right now. And I think when we always talk about how hard marriage is, we don't give people the idea that actually, if you do it right, and if you really prioritize each other early, it can just become a habit that's wonderful. And that's kind of the thing that undergirds everything else.
Absolutely. I think that brings it back to your very first point, that ultimately what we're talking about here is being conformed to the image of Christ, reflecting Jesus. What's hard is being selfish and living selfishly up against a mirror. That's hard. Yes. That's cool. I like that. I'm going to make an effort to choose my language more joyously and intentionally when I describe marriage to people. Because I think maybe it's just a human thing or a Canadian thing to complain and be like, oh yeah, marriage. That's good. Sheila, where can people learn more about you and find your books and so on?
Well, to love, honor, and vacuum.com, honor without the U, so I spell it the American way. I know, shock. To love, honor, and vacuum.com. And my books, the two big ones are The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex and 9 Thoughts That Can Change Your Marriage. And let's get past pat answers and towards more the heart of Jesus for marriage.
Would you pray for us, Sheila, as we attempt to pursue the heart of Jesus in our marriages?
I sure will. Dear Jesus, thank you so much for marriage. It's such a weird thing because we have two imperfect people and you put us together and it causes us to form this other imperfect being. And yet we know that all of us who are married are within your will and that your will is for our marriages to shine. And so I pray that you will give us a bigger picture of how we can reflect you in each of our individual marriages, that we don't have to live up to stereotypes, and don't let us be burdened by some of these stereotypes that sometimes are put on us by the church. But let us just see where the Spirit is taking us and teach us day by day to listen to your Spirit. And as we were talking about at the end, marriage does reveal our selfishness. And so God, even if it hurts, show us, for everyone listening, just show us one area maybe where we are being selfish right now and where we need to be more giving. And let us be humble enough to hear that. And then God, as we were also talking about today, show us maybe one thing that we can do in our daily lives that will just help marriage go a little bit smoother, whether it's our bedtime routine, whether it's taking more time to chat, whatever it may be. Just show us one thing that we can do to make our marriages closer. And God, I do pray that our marriages will be the thing that undergirds our families and makes our churches stronger so that you can change this culture through us. In your precious name, amen.
Thank you, Sheila, for that. Oh, I really enjoyed that. Listen, friends, something that I take very seriously is when one believer makes an accusation against another. It's really easy online to throw disrespect around and to accuse people of espousing different viewpoints and so on and so forth. Some of you will have listened to the podcast I did with Frank Viola where we discussed when one Christian labels another a heretic and throws them under a bus and so on. So I'm passionate about that. And once Sheila and I concluded this interview, we discussed off-air a number of things relating to Dr. Eggerichs and whether she had been able to successfully connect with him, and she had not. So I reached out to Dr. Eggerichs as well, and I informed his team that I had had a discussion with Sheila, or with somebody, about this message and concerns that this message had caused real difficulty in people's lives. And if he was willing to dialogue on that. They thanked me for my email, and they sent me a copy of another book Dr. Eggerichs has written called Before You Hit Send, which similarly encourages us to dig deeper and find out what's going on before we publish something online or send that angry email or so on and so forth. So I was hoping that would turn into a real dialogue. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Dr. Eggerichs wrote a couple of blog posts, and he directed me to those. I wasn't actually able to discuss with him the particular issues. So whether or not he was already aware of other people talking about this, I can't say. I said I have issues I'd like to talk about, and he said, great, read this blog. So there we are. The blog in question you can read for yourself at loveandrespect.com/blog. There's a scroll back till March 4th. There's an entry called How Have You and Your Spouse Achieved Win-Win in Your Sexual Intimacy, Part 1. I'd like to say right off the bat that Dr. Eggerichs seems to have softened the language that he's used in the book. I went back and read that sex chapter in the book as well. I found I still have it from, 14 years ago, getting married. And as Sheila said, I was really troubled and disturbed by the way that sexuality was described and the way that needs were described. I do see that those of us who are concerned could be misinterpreting him in some capacity, but definitely it is not a generous mutual discussion on sexuality. Now, what you see in his blog is a more generous mutuality. And so I don't know if that reflects a change in his views or whether his views weren't clearly communicated in the book. From reading through a few other of his blog posts, it sounds like in his marriage conferences and so on, there's much more given on sexuality. That sounds maybe really good. I can't speak to that. I've not seen him in person, and we haven't been able to connect. He didn't take up my offer to have a direct dialogue on this. So I want to just make sure that I present that resource to you, that if you have read Love and Respect and you felt it was helpful and think that this is an unfair painting of it, that's okay. I don't want to portray Dr. Eggerichs in a certain light. I don't know exactly where he sits and whether he's particularly aware of some of the harm that's been caused on this issue. As Matthew encourages us when we have a disagreement with a brother to take them aside privately, I've attempted to do that. I did not have success. And in listening back to the discussion that Sheila and I had right here, I don't think anything unkind or unfair was said about this message. As I said, I take this seriously, and if you listen closely, I've endeavored that my podcast is always an outlet of kindness and warmth and love. As we start to talk about wounding, we have to be able to have robust conversations that involve sometimes people being wrong or people having shared a message that brings heartache. So understand that I think very carefully about what I include in the show, and that I feel that what Sheila shared was important and necessary and accurate and kindly offered. And so that's the spirit of this here. Thanks again for tuning in, and make sure to go check out tolovehonorandvacuum.com. You've been listening to the podcast with me, Jonathan Puddle. I've dedicated my life to helping people access the freedom that God designed for them and to love others sacrificially, just like God does. Basically, I think we're meant to live like God himself, and I want to help you get there. This podcast is part of that, and every week I interview people to dig into the rich soul of a Jesus-centered life. Make sure to check out some of the earlier episodes. I've had everyone from Olympic athletes to local friends to famous DJs and major Christian leaders like Brian Zahn, Priscilla Shirer, and Sheila Walsh. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, head over to jonathanpuddle.com and grab my free book, You Are the Solution to Someone's Problem. I'm pretty sure it's going to brighten your day. And if you enjoy that too, then would you consider supporting me on Patreon? You can get one-on-one spiritual coaching from me, as well as a private supporters-only podcast with unique content that I don't make available to the public. There's a number of other benefits there as well. You'll find me at patreon.com/JonathanPuddle. Thank you so much for listening, and may you be filled with grace and peace from the Lord God, who created all things, holds all things together, and is personally invested in